Ever since I was a kid, I would always go to Haiti from July to August. I wasn't born there, but my parents felt that it was more educating than sending me to Walt Disney World. But I actually wanted to go to Disney World. But going to Haiti from July to August, it really gave me a delight and a deeper understanding of my culture. My grandmothers didn't speak English, and I wasn't really well-versed in Creole or French, so it was a lot of sign languaging going on, but it was fun. So coming back from Haiti in 2003, that was the last time that I went, and I just felt like, you know what, we're going to start the Haitian Heritage Museum, and did all the research. You know, as historians, there was not one. I was really amazed, like, wow, there were a lot of museums that had information or areas of their museum that housed Haitian information, but there was not one museum that was totally dedicated to the Haitian culture. So Serge and I, you know, his architect background and my political science and history background, we decided that we needed to do the museum. So this is our second home. We've been around since 2004, and we just have really been growing, and we have a lot of programming, and we met Brooke and Chantal Vernal. I actually met Dr. Vernal before she had her Ph.D. And it's just an incredible time to see that we both grew in different directions, but it's really a commonality for the love of our country and, of course, the Caribbean. So hopefully Chantal is making her way over. Is she making her way over?
I hear footsteps.
You hear footsteps, okay. I don't know, I can take any minute questions real quick. Oh, I see the reflection.
Saved by the bell.
2020 vision. Okay, well, without further ado, I'm going to give a brief bio of Dr. Chantal Vernal. Dr. Vernal is a professor of history and international relations at Florida International University. She earned her Ph.D. in comparative black history from Michigan State University, and her focus is her research on culture of inter-American relations, specifically concerning Haiti and the United States during the mid-20th century. She is revising her book manuscript entitled Haiti's Second Independence and the Promise of the Post-Occupation Period, 1930 through 1956, for publication. Among her professional service activities, she is on the Academic Advisory Board of the Digital Library of the Caribbean. Without further ado, please give it up for Chantal Vernal.
To all those who are members of the board of the Haitian Heritage Museum, and of course to all of you for taking the time to join us this evening. Without you, we would just continue to have this one-on-one conversation that we always enjoy, but it's really great. We're looking forward to the conversation afterwards. This gathering this evening is really a demonstration of my own personal vision. When I decided to pursue a career in the academy, much of that was based on my thought that by being based in the university, I could sort of reach my arms out and make connections with people on many different fronts. So making connections with fabulous scholars such as Dr. Smith, making connections with wonderful people in the community, such as here at the Haitian Heritage Museum, and also being part of a wonderful institution such as FIU. FIU has demonstrated its commitment to the study of Latin American and Caribbean studies for some time, since 1979, and particularly through its Title VI program, which is partnered with the University of Florida. It's been able to become a leader, establish itself with its faculty, its expert faculty, its academic programs, demonstrating its commitment to Latin American and Caribbean studies. And particularly, it has prioritized the study of Haiti, its language and its people in particular, and we see that with this year celebrating the 12th anniversary of the Haitian Studies Institute. We have many of the students who are participating in this year's institute as a testimony to that. And people come from all over the United States and historically also different parts of the world to participate in this program. So this is just a testament of one example of what FIU's commitment to not only the study of the region, but specific to Haiti. And so of course for me as a scholar of Haiti and of someone of Haitian descent, that makes me very proud to be a part of that institution. And so these graduates are students, the professors, they are people who are working in NGOs, they're simply business people, artists and writers, people who have some sort of personal, passionate, professional connection to Haiti. And so it's very exciting to be a part of an institution such as that. One of the other exciting developments that's taking place at FIU right now, also in collaboration with the University of Florida, of which Dr. Smith is an alum, is the DLOC program, the Digital Library of the Caribbean. And it is really through the leadership of the Digital Library of the Caribbean's project director, Brooke Wooldridge, which I wish she would make herself visible to people so they could see that this project has been able to come together. I love talking to Brooke. Things always get exciting when I talk to Brooke. We have so many ideas, and so one of the ideas that came through one of our conversations this spring was the thought that we could bring Matthew Smith here, and so I'm very glad that this has actually been. DLOC began in 2004, and with U.S. Department of Education funding, we've been able to work together to put materials online to increase access, not only for those of us here, but also those working in the Caribbean, anywhere around the world, for free. With that type of funding, as well as the collaborations of scholars and archivists and librarians here in the U.S., as well as in the Caribbean, these Caribbean materials are able to, was one of the first of 5 partner countries in this project, which I'm also very excited about. And the main 3 partners are the National Library of Haiti, the National Archives of Haiti, and the Haitian Library of the Ph.D, also in Port-au-Prince. So this is a really exciting development. And so DLOC and Brooke Wooldridge, as well as the FIU's LAC and the library, has been a major supporter in terms of bringing this type of access, 18th and 19th century evidence, to people around the world. For example, just one example of many, 1801 letter from Toussaint Louverture to Napoleon Bonaparte. So this is just an example of the things. Old newspapers, which newspapers played a central role in the coming together of red and black in Haiti. For those of you who already had a chance to see, you see how important it is to get access to newspaper materials, even if it's just for a short run. And so now these materials are more broadly available. So we encourage you, if you're aware of materials that can be digitized and provided on DLOC's homepage, let us know. We invite you to be a partner with us. The other thing that's really wonderful about DLOC is it broadens access while at the same time allowing us to preserve the materials in the home countries. So the materials are able to stay in the home countries or with the family or whoever is the primary owner of the documentation. So I just want to make note of a few other persons who really need to be specially recognized for tonight's event. Evelyn Pierre, who you've already met, the Executive Director of the Haitian Heritage Museum. Serge Rodriguez, who is the Director of Operations here, documenting this so it can be part of the historical archives. Liesl Picard, our fabulous, extraordinary acting director, who ever since I've been at FIU, she has always just been so excited and helpful and saying yes to anything positive related to Haiti. I wish we could see Liesl Picard. She's hiding.
Yes, yes, yes.
Also, Laura Probst, the Dean of the University Libraries, who I have not had a chance to meet yet. If you could make yourself also visible. Hi, thank you. But I've also just heard wonderful things from Brooke about how supportive you have been for DLOC and for this event and the work that we're interested in doing. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. Brenda Clemens from the FIU bookstore, who has just gone above and beyond in terms of purchasing the books and making them available. There are copies here for your purchase and for signing afterwards, and so there's nothing out like this. And I say that not only because this is my fellow historian and friend, but truly because this is a book that will be noted as a classic. And so I encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to purchase your copy and have it signed. And I've already mentioned Brooke Wooldridge. So just a few words about our esteemed guest, Dr. Smith, Matthew Jordan Smith. Matthew Jordan Smith is a lecturer in history in the Department of History and Archaeology at the University of West Indies, UWI Mona, in Jamaica. He earned a BA with honors from the Department of History and a Master's of Science from the Department of Government at UWI Mona. Then he continued with his doctoral studies here in Latin American history with a minor in modern U.S. history at the University of Florida. I would also note studying with another premier scholar in the field of Haitian studies, David Viegas. If anybody has picked anything up with Haitian Revolution, they are likely to have come across Dr. Viegas' name. So you know that he went through some hardcore training working with Viegas. His main area of research is in Haitian politics and society after the U.S. occupation and Haitian migration to Jamaica in the 19th and early 20th centuries. He has published several articles and book chapters on various aspects of Haitian history and politics. And of course, this book that has brought us here this evening, Red and Black in Haiti, Radicalism, Conflict, and Political Change, 1934 through 1957. He has been the recipient of a Fulbright Scholarship for Graduate Studies, which facilitated his travel to Gainesville at the University of Florida, an Andrew Mellon Visiting Professorship at the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies at Duke University, and a Du Bois Mandela Rodney Postdoctoral Fellowship at the Center for Afro-American and African Studies at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. At UWI, he teaches undergraduate courses in Haitian history and U.S. history, and he has now taken on the charge of being a board member of the Haitian Studies Association. And so for those of you who may not already be familiar with HSA or members and are interested in Haitian studies, I know that he'll welcome your chatting with him and looking to become a part of the organization. So without any further delay, I welcome you, my very good friend and colleague, Dr. Matthew Jordan Smith.
Bonsoir tout le monde.
Bonsoir.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Chantal, for that introduction. And also special thanks to Chantal again for really extending the invitation to you to be here. It's been wonderful. The team at FIU, the team at DLOC, especially Brooke and everyone I've met since I've been here have been exceptional in their treatment of me. I've had a wonderful time. I had a great session yesterday with some students and others at the university, and it's just been a great experience overall to meet new colleagues, meet people that I've read their work but never met before, and to share some of what I've been working on with them. It's also very important for me and quite fitting to have this talk in the Haitian Heritage Museum. This is actually the first time I'm speaking on the book since it's been out. It's barely a month old now, and so it's fairly new. And I can't think of a more fitting place to have this first talk than the Haitian Heritage Museum. So I'm very grateful to be here, and grateful that everyone turned out to hear the talk this evening. The title of my talk is called Flags, Freedom, and Fate, Haitian Radicalism and Post-Occupation Experience. And I hope that during the course of what I have to say, you'll understand why I decided to use that title, as it reflects several of the themes that I think arise out of the work that I've done in this book, and that I think are very much characteristic of the post-occupation period. There exist remarkable echoes across the long corridor of Haitian history. For all of us, from those who trawl through the dusty reams of archival documentation, to those who have even a passing sense of the island's extraordinary life, these echoes sometimes ring loudly. There's one, however, that I find particularly striking, which I would like to share with you this evening. In 1950, Haitian President Dumas Says-Estimé was undecorously overthrown by a military junta. He left Haiti for temporary exile in Paris before deciding to return to the Caribbean and settle in Jamaica. In the Jamaican Daily Gleaner, the island's longest-running newspaper, Estimé's arrival in Kingston attracted front-page news. The image that accompanied the article was of a very slender, 50-year-old man with glasses, his wife and young children by his side. Estimé's exile in Jamaica attracted a great deal of attention. His rivals and supporters in Haiti were concerned that his rivals and their supporters in Haiti were concerned that he would launch an attempt from the neighboring island to reinstate his administration. They were wrong. Estimé enjoyed a brief sojourn in Jamaica before resettling in New York. A half-decade ago, this image found its reprise. When Jean-Bertrand Aristide was overthrown in 2004, as we will all recall, he left Haiti for the Central African Republic before taking up temporary residence in Jamaica. The image that accompanied the article in the local press in Jamaica about Aristide's arrival in Kingston was of a very slender, 50-year-old man with glasses, his wife, and young children by his side. Making the comparison all the more interesting is the fact that a few months before his overthrow, Estimé presided over the bicentenary celebrations of Port-au-Prince. Likewise, Aristide presided over the bicentenary celebration of Haitian independence shortly before his exit. Even more fascinating, both celebrations occurred against the backdrop of a rising protest movement in the island against their governments which I might add, that came to power promising a great deal of change in Haiti. History, as we well know, doesn't repeat itself, but as Mark Twain once said, it does rhyme. Many may regard these similarities between the president popularly known as Titim and the one popularly known as Titid as interesting but not unusual. By themselves, they are but two of many tales of Haitian presidents who overstay their welcome and are forced by coup into exile, a predictable sequel to a familiar story. At its root, this perspective regards Haitian history as cyclical or unchanging. Political leaders of the present achieve little and most often repeat the failings of their predecessors. Such a view of Haiti's political history has enjoyed incredible endurance. Since the 19th century, there has been a strong propensity in general approaches to Haiti's history to treat the country as fated to a cycle of political crisis. News reports of current political problems in the island tend to reference the Haitian Revolution, almost suggesting that it remains the cause of contemporary woes. In its most vulgar expression, this perspective presents an image of those of us in the present clutching the loose end of an unbroken, rusty chain of political unrest that is bolted on the other side to 1804. What is usually missing from the compression of 205 years of history is that each of these political crises have their own roots, causes, dynamics, and progression, despite the similarity of their outcomes. Perhaps it is not only the dramatic consequences of political crises that we need to investigate, but the very creation of the crises themselves, the peculiar and familiar circumstances that within a particular context, space, and time conspire to produce political conflict. For the Haitians who lived through each moment of political upheaval, there was nothing indeterminate about their season of unrest. Over 100 years ago, President Noir-Alexis, near the end of his presidency, encapsulated this feeling in a remark he made to a visitor at his residence. Quote, "Haitians are tired of revolutions," end quote. What was most desired by those in the past was that the material conditions that created the troublesome problem of political destabilization could be reversed. Such was the case with the post-occupation period. That is, the years between the termination of the U.S. occupation of Haiti in 1934 and the election of François Duvalier in 1957, which presented a series of crises like no other in Haiti's history. For the generation of the post-occupation, these years were a chance to transform Haiti's politics from elite exclusion that bred dictatorship, repression, and exile to popular participation and democracy. This proposition seemed possible because the post-occupation produced a spate of competing progressive movements, each crafting its own alternative for Haiti's future. This factor was one of the principal motivations for me to write this book. The book began life several years ago as a dissertation while I was a graduate student at the University of Florida. I was curious to explore the meaning of the post-occupation period to Haitian history and the ways in which political crises of that period evolved. This attraction stemmed from a reading of the pioneering work of David Nichols, Michel Wolfe-Twill, Michael Dash, Brenda Gale Plummer, Michel Hector, Vance Voltaire, and Patrick Bellegarde-Smith, who have all given us sophisticated interpretations of Haitian politics. More personally, my interest was guided by a longer scholarly fascination with radical politics and that peculiar mix of race, color, and leftism in Caribbean radical thought. In post-occupation Haiti, all of this existed in compelling form, as radicals from various perspectives had to contend with the traditional color and class issues in Haitian politics. Their movements expanded rapidly over the course of 2 decades, moving from the concerns of elite and middle-class progressives to broader urban-based protests for social change. The infusion of radicalism in all aspects of Haitian political life was near inescapable. As Michel Hector told me of the 1940s in Haiti during an early stage of my research, tout bagay était gauche. Everything was left. I therefore wanted to explore in my research the history of the Haitian left during these years, in an effort to understand more clearly how it fit into the bigger picture of post-occupation politics and regional radicalism. This was not an easy task. It involved capturing a history that has often been accorded fleeting importance in traditional narratives. Some of this was not without reason. The source material for a study of the Haitian left is extremely diffuse and involved threading together fragments of information to build a reliable narrative. The research required examination of a variety of sources, both in the United States and also in Haiti, especially, as Dr. Werner mentioned earlier, newspapers, the core element in this type of research, and government documents. It also involved conducting interviews with participants themselves. For some of my informants, it meant going past the often painful recollections of the Duvalier years to an early period when victory had more currency than violence. I was fortunate, however, to have found willing participants and a host of scholars, librarians, archivists, and supporters in Haiti and the United States who offered invaluable assistance. This assistance made it possible for me to go further than I expected to recover this often forgotten history of the Haitian left. What I discovered in the process was that there was a great deal that was assumed about the post-occupation period in general. The post-occupation, quite simply, had not been given the careful scrutiny it deserved. While it figures in general histories of Haiti, it was most often treated as the aftermath of the occupation or a prelude to Duvalier. One well-known history book on Haiti, in the years that it covers on the post-occupation, simply titles it The Coming of Duvalier. Much else was either taken for granted or simply ignored. I realized then, early on, that in order to tell the story of the Haitian left, the convoluted politics of the era needed disentanglement and closer examination. These were serious times. Much change in Haitian political life during these years. Political participation increased a great deal with the rise of labor unions and political parties. There was also the emergence of brilliant, talented, and charismatic personalities invested in the political welfare of the country. Jacques Roumet, Georges Petit, Daniel Fignolet, René Depeste, Gérard Blancourt, Roger Dolceville, and Max Oudikou, just to name a few. The Haitian army was strengthened. The United States reaffirmed its critical role in influencing Haitian affairs, and Haiti's historical color, class, and social divisions were powerfully contested. The traditional political elite also found its role as custodians of state power reduced. But most important, there was a vibrant renewal in Haitian nationalism, reflected in the politics and the culture of the era. This renewed nationalism is referenced throughout the book with the image of the Haitian flag, the foremost symbol of the country's nationalism. The cover of the book features a fantastic image from 1947. It is of an enormous crowd in Port-au-Prince, being led in procession by a flag bearer, holding the flag as if it were a torch, the unifying power of which is understood by all. It's a powerful photograph that in many ways captures the themes and spirits of the era. The motive of the